Uh, this is Savannah, I'm James, and we're here obviously to talk about the Somaliland Marathon. In an ideal world, there would be some Somalilanders here. The race is organised by a lot of different people, different nationalities, but obviously we're British, we're in the UK, and that's why we're talking about it, and they're not. Somaliland to begin with. Some people ask, where is Somaliland? What is Somaliland? Is it Somalia? Is it full of insurgency and pirates and camels and goats and what is it? And that's a good question. And the question about whether Somaliland is part of Somalia is difficult to answer. It depends very much on your perspective. If you're a government official in Mogadishu, the capital of Somalia, then absolutely, Somaliland is part of Somalia. It's a state in Somaliland, much like Jubaland or Puntland. If you're a government official in Hargeisa, the capital of Somaliland, then it absolutely isn't. It's an independent country with its own currency, its own government, its own army. It can strike trade deals with other countries. But effectively, it's not internationally recognised. It doesn't have a seat on the UN. It's not part of FIFA. It doesn't have an Olympic Committee. There are a few bodies in the world, including, bizarrely, Cardiff City Council, that do recognise Somaliland as an independent nation. But that's true. That's a true fact. But everyone else doesn't recognise Somaliland as an independent nation. But why is that? What Somaliland governments and Somali governments can agree on is they're all Somali. And the shaded area on that map shows where Somalis live. And Somali people have lived in that area for millennia. In Egyptian hieroglyphs and Greek texts, it talks about trading with the land of Punt, which is this area here. Cave paintings show that people were pastoral nomads with sheep, camels, and mainly that was living off livestock. But Somalis also look out, they're great traders. Somalia has the largest coastline in Africa, and people trade and look as much towards Arabia and the Middle East as they do towards the rest of Africa. The borders you see on this map now were drawn in the 19th century during the colonial times. And Somalia was split into three areas. Djibouti, which was French Somalia, the main part of Somalia, which is all in blue, which was Italian Somalia, and the yellow section, which was British Somaliland. And unlike in Mogadishu, where you will see Italian colonial architecture, the British really didn't do very much in Somaliland. They basically used it as a larder, buying sheep and goats and cattle from the Somalilanders, shipping them across to Aden in Yemen, and filling the boats that sailed between India and Britain. This was the state until 1960, when Somaliland and Somalia both gained independence. They joined together to create the state of Somalia. And in 1991, when the Siad Barre regime fell in Mogadishu, there was a bloody civil war, and Somaliland separated to leave us with the situation that we have today. So it's one of those few places in the world where you can take a plane from Somaliland, and it's an international flight, and by the time you land in Mogadishu, it's miraculously turned into a domestic flight. And in Somaliland, there's a little bit of British influence left. There's not that much left, but occasionally you'll see some. The first time I went to Somaliland, I ordered a coffee, and I got a really good Ethiopian coffee made from an Italian espresso machine, but served in, as you can see, a very British half-pint mug. And there's more sort of British influence. This is a guy called Richard Darlington, and he was the headmaster of Sheikh School in Somaliland. And Sheikh was the kind of the Eton of Somaliland. And as well as being very keen on sports, he was a great educator. He was the headmaster for over 20 years. He was also a really nice man. If people couldn't afford to go on to tertiary education, to university, he would give them the money to do that. And on his death, he left a large bursary to continue to pay people for their tertiary education. And there's a foundation now that his family run called the Gamaderi Foundation, the Darlington Foundation. Gamaderi means long arms, which was a nickname, a Somali nickname that he had. And they still run that foundation today. And in 2015, his great nephew, a guy called Ollie, who actually was supposed to give this talk, but he couldn't make it, was with his friend Ahmed in Hargeisa, and they love to go running. And they thought, why don't we put on a marathon to raise money to put more people through tertiary education? And they did a lot of work. They mapped out a course, they spoke to the Athletics Federation, the Ministry of Youth and Sports, the mayor, they spoke to runners, they had everything prepared, but they didn't feel quite comfortable enough to organise the race because there'd never been a marathon in Hargeisa before, they'd never organised a race before. And that's when they contacted me. This is me, I'm in the high vis, just so you can recognise who I am. This is me helping organise the first marathon of Afghanistan in 2015. This year will be the 6th version of that race, and it's the only mixed gender sporting event in the whole of Afghanistan. So as well as organising marathons in post-conflict areas, my company Untamed Borders arranged travel in Somalia. In 2012, we organised the first people to visit Mogadishu. This is a photo one of them took. It's the cockpit of a Belarusian freight plane, and this is not in the airport. This was just on the street in the middle of Mogadishu. It's changed a bit now, but that was definitely the state of Mogadishu at the time. I also, in 2016, led a group of Austrians to this. This is a lighthouse on the very tip of the Horn of Africa, and the shape of it's quite interesting. This is the first first tourists that have been there for 25 years. It's an interesting shape. It's the shape of the Italian fascist symbol, and oddly enough, in the tip of the Horn of Africa, it's the largest remaining Italian fascist symbol in the world. So I had some experience in organising races. I had some experience in Somalia, but oddly at that point, I'd only ever been to Somaliland once. And what I knew, Ollie was very keen on having a race that had male and female participation. And from my time in Afghanistan, I knew that in conservative countries this could be a challenge. And whilst Ollie and I were thinking about how best to do that, there was somebody in Hargeisa, already living in Hargeisa, that was already considering the same kind of issues.
So, I moved out to Somaliland in 2015 in the capital of Somaliland, so Hargeisa. I absolutely loved it. So I was living there, working for a Somali company, and was absolutely living the dream. So this is me living the dream. I loved how welcoming people were, how relaxed everything was. Mostly the afternoon naps, but there are lots of other great things. So this is initially what I was told to expect. It's dangerous, it's lawless, you won't be safe, what are you doing, are you sure? And I mean, really, I've never heard so many pirate jokes in such a short space of time. It was, and they kept coming, they don't stop once you move there. So one of the things also that surprised me was I was warned a lot about the lack of systems and processes that would be there. So not only was I surprised to find that things worked, but my shopping time was cut in half. So this was mostly because of who I was competing with in the shops, but also because of mobile money. So in Somaliland, mobile money is the primary form of payment. So over 78% of adults in Somaliland use mobile money. It's amazing. You walk into a shop, pick up a loaf of bread or some sugar-free sugar, which is one of my personal favorites, and you pay by text in under a minute. Really, really quick. And it's not just in urban areas, it's in rural areas too. So mobile money actually played a large role in providing kind of life-saving assistance during the last droughts and famine, when hard-to-reach communities were able to be supported through kind of mobile money directly sent from urban areas, primarily urban areas. So there's lots to do in Somaliland. You've got Laskel, Berbera, restaurants, more restaurants, a lot of restaurants. But actually, so there are things to do. This is Laskel, so one of the kind of main tourist attractions of Somaliland. Cave paintings, estimated to be between 5,000 and 7,000 years old. People come from all over the world to come and see these cave paintings. There's Berbera Beach, really, really incredible. White sand, clear water, me drowning, trying to swim in a dress. That was also a personal favorite. But mostly, really, really incredible things to do in Somaliland. So the first few months I was there, I was living off luho for breakfast, so mostly Somali pancakes similar to injera, and goat and rice for lunch. So that was obviously the ideal diet for a vegetarian of 5 years. But I later learned there's a lot more to the Somali diet than that. Camel, so that was another personal favorite. But I was really excited to get to know the people, the city, and ended up spending a lot of time with the women in the office. One called Asma, who is pictured here, who's now one of my closest friends. We spent the first few months kind of a lot of time together, and realised after a while that all we'd done is eat. restaurants, cafes, people's houses, eating is the main activity in Somaliland. Well, for us at least at that time it was. And we were speaking to a lot of the other women that we were across, and we were saying, where can we go to work this off? Is there anywhere women can go to do sport? No was the short answer. So we scanned the city. We were speaking to gym owners, going out and about, seeing what was there, and found that really all there was for women was kind of 1 hour in a men's gym, 11 p.m. till midnight on a Wednesday, if the gym supervisor felt like it at that moment in time. So really not a lot going on. So we thought, why don't we set something up? Let's find somewhere and do something so that we can exercise and other women can exercise too. And that was kind of the beginning of our kind of journey into women's sport in Somaliland. So first step was, okay, let's find a time and a space. So this is when we met Mohammed, who was a pitch owner in Somaliland. And he's a very religious man, very supportive of women's sport and health as well. So seemed like an ideal fit. And after kind of long discussions about the cultural considerations that needed to be made, so Somaliland is a very conservative society, so women can't exercise. But if we want to exercise wearing what we here would consider traditional sports kit, it needs to be in a closed environment where men can't come in or men can't see. And Mohammed's pitch had very high walls, good security, so perfect match. We started playing. Started just 6 of us, and it grew and grew and grew. And 3 years later, we're at a stage now where we're getting regularly 40, 50, 60 women turning up to play football on 2 7-a-side pitches. So really, we should be capping it at 28, but that's we don't want to. Really lots of women keen to exercise, keen to do sport, and that was the beginning really. And our dream is to set up a women's sport and health centre run by women for women. So if there are any millionaires listening, come and find me at the end, please. So that was the beginning of our journey really. And now we have a real community of women and girls who kind of care about sport, health, fitness, and this is what led us into the marathon.
Thanks, Savannah. So Savannah sort of paints a picture of sort of female sport and the issues in finding spaces to do sport in Hargeisa. And as Savannah was going through that process, was in 2018, February 2018, when Ollie and I and an Irish chap called Enda met up with Ahmed, basically the kind of race committee, to organise the first marathon, Somaliland Marathon. And I say Somaliland Marathon, but actually there's 2 races. There's a marathon and there's a 10-kilometre race. And there's various reasons why there's 2 races, but it basically boils down to the fact that running a marathon is really, really, really hard. And especially in a country where nobody's run a marathon before, you've seen a little bit of how, for females, how difficult it is to actually find somewhere to train. Although Somalis are natural distance runners, there wasn't no one had done any races over 10K before. If we came in and just set up a marathon, there'd be about 25 runners, half of them international. It wouldn't be much of an event. And from my experience in Afghanistan, having a 10K race and a marathon, it also helps with how we fund the race. If you organise a race in the UK, it's fine. You charge everyone a flat fee, everyone pays the money, you use some of that money to organise the race, and any money left over you can give to charity. Absolutely fine. But you can imagine Somalilanders don't have quite as much disposable income as people in West London. So we charge the Somalilanders a nominal fee, which is $1, although we don't really ever collect that. And the income of the race comes from the international runners. So although we have international marathon runners come to do the race, the expat in Hargeisa who just sit around in restaurants all day are only going to be managed to 10K, and we need their fees to come in to help support the race. We also fund the race through local sponsors, and a 30-person marathon race is not that appealing for a local sponsor. But if we could get 200, 250, 300 runners running a 10K, it's all over the TV, they get lots of exposure, they give more money. So the 10K is an integral part of the race. So as I said, we had 2 points. One was to attract international runners. And as we talked about Somaliland and Somalia, there's an association. Is it safe? Is it safe to go to Somaliland to run a marathon? And in the east of Somaliland, close to the border of Somalia, there are some insecure areas. But in the city of Hargeisa itself, we're quite happy for the international people to walk around themselves. It's certainly no more dangerous, or at least probably safer than a lot of other sub-Saharan cities in Africa. You have to take some precautions, but basically it's okay. When you leave outside of Hargeisa, the government does give you a policeman, but he's as much to get you through checkpoints as any kind of security. And the hotels take security very seriously as well. They often put up posters to make sure no one brings Kalashnikovs, knives, or walking sticks into the hotel. And we're extremely fortunate with sponsorship. As I talked about, Richard Darlington, the headmaster of Sheikh School, Mr. Gamaderi, Mr. Longarms made sure that we were greeted with open arms by a lot of the companies and organisations in Somaliland. People of a certain age and sort of social standing knew him very well. So the people that owned larger companies and were the marketing directors of large companies, they knew who he was. And we have a main sponsor who is a company called Dab Shil, and it's an umbrella organisation that owns about 50% of the businesses in Somaliland, including a telecommunications company, a car dealership, 2 banks, and all of these kind of things. We also get sponsorship of the water through Coca-Cola, and our medical support is provided by the hospital by a lady named Edna, and she supplied 40 nurses and doctors for the race. And Edna, actually herself, you could do a whole talk about Edna. She was the first. She left Somaliland when she was 20 years old, came to the UK to study midwifery. She was the first Somalilander to come and study midwifery. When she went back to Somaliland, she was the first woman in Somaliland to get a driving license. She married a man who later became the president of Somalia, was kept in prison for a while, and then came back to Somaliland and opened her hospital. And in fact, if you want to know more about Edna, she's appeared on Desert Island Discs, and I highly recommend you listen to the episode. It's excellent. She supplied 40 nurses and doctors, and in a race when there were 250 runners over the 10-kilometre and the marathon race, that's a lot of medical support, and we think it might have been the most medically supported race per medical person to runner in the world at that time. But as you can see, the nurses and the doctors helped out in lots of other ways. So we had all the support, we had the international runners, we had the sponsors, we had support, but the day before the race we were getting quite nervous. Even though Savannah highlighted how a lot of people pay with mobile banking, registration was very much old school, and everyone was told to turn up at the Ministry of Youth and Sport at a certain time on the day before the race, and we really had no idea if anyone did. But fortunately, when we turned up at the Ministry of Youth and Sport, there was a huge queue outside, and we registered everybody in time. And the night before the race, to be honest, we didn't get much sleep. We were quite worried. At the registration, 5 Somaliland women had signed up through the hospital. We had 8 international women. A marathon had never been held in Somaliland before. No women and men had ever run before on the street together. We were holding the race on a Friday, and everybody told us all the volunteers had never been involved in something like this before. We had to finish by 11:45 precisely because everybody was going to go to lunchtime prayers. We were told that repeatedly, which meant we had to start the race at 6:30 in the morning. And obviously Somaliland, people are responsible, but it's not Switzerland. Trying to get all of those people who had never been organising the race before on time to start something at 6:30, we were extremely worried about it. But fortunately, we managed to do it. And the race starts in the stadium in Hargeisa. It runs out of the city. This is about the 5-kilometre checkpoint. So it's dawn has just risen. The first runners are coming through. It runs out to sort of scrubland, and then it runs out to a road called the Gabili Road out into the kind of desert. It loops around and then comes back into the city. And by the time the first runners come back into the city's woken up, and we got quite decent crowds along the route. Everybody watching the runners. Some of the Somalilanders were in pretty good shape. And if you finish that race in 3.5, 4 hours, like a lot of the Somalilanders do, it's fine. That's like 9:30, 10 o'clock. It's a desert climate, so the sun hasn't risen too high. It's not too hot. The roads are still clear. But if you come in just under the cutoff of 5 hours, one, it's got quite hot, and the traffic has started to build up. And actually, the route is on the cat delivery run. And for those of you that don't know about cat is a mild narcotic, It's very popular in Somaliland and Yemen. It's not grown there though. It's grown in the highlands of Ethiopia. And it's chewed, you chew the leaf, but the effects wear off with time. So as soon as it's picked, it's packed into a car and driven to the markets. And the quickest route from A to B in that part of Africa is whichever route the cat driver takes, and they drive like hell. And so even with the police and the army support, the cat always gets through. So if you're a slower runner, it gets a bit hot, the cat drivers come through, you've got to dodge those. But we managed to get everyone in, we managed to get everyone in safely. And we were amazed that we managed to have 5 Somalilander women run with the men and complete the 10-kilometre race. And we were pretty happy with that first race, but we wanted to make it bigger. We wanted runners from other parts of Somaliland to come. We wanted runners from other parts of Greater Somaliland to come, and we wanted women with, we wanted greater female participation as well. And at that point, I'd not ever met Savannah. I'd never heard of Savannah, but this is where our kind of story comes together.
So, at this point in 2018, we hear about the marathon a couple of days before the race and were extremely skeptical. We thought, who are these people? Do they know what they're doing? Is this going to do more harm than good? Do they understand the considerations that need to be made? Are they going to ruin, are they going to ruin it for everyone, basically?
That's fair enough.
So we were watching from a safe space, very cautiously, but we're really pleased to see that things went off relatively smoothly. They had around 200 runners, 13 women, 5 Somali women, so we were really pleased to see that. So when the team reached out later in the year to Asma and myself to get support for the next race, we were initially really positive and kind of excited to see where this could go. But first we still had 1,000,001 questions. Will there be security? Will women be allowed to run? What are women allowed to wear? Is there government support? What are the risks? What kind of media coverage will there be? A lot of things we needed to know about and consider before we felt comfortable kind of getting involved and having all of the women from the sports club involved as well. So after long discussions with the team, we were happy with the measures put in place and what was there for the races, and really got behind it, started creating buzz, getting trying to get as many people hyped as possible. And this is when we kind of encountered our next obstacle, which was we had a lot of women who were really keen to run, but nowhere to train. So when your main training opportunity is running around in circles on a 7-a-side pitch, a 10K is going to be hard, let alone a marathon. So Somaliland's not really the kind of place where women can easily go out running alone. So this is actually a struggle, something we're still struggling with for the upcoming race as well. But hopefully the way things are going in Somaliland will soon be at a stage where there are more training facilities for women. In the end, everything worked out, and we had 50 women participating in the 10K and marathon races in total, with 40 Somali women. Really positive. It was really well received locally and internationally, to the point where on the finish line there was no space for runners between the politicians and the press trying to kind of be seen on the finish line, which was really great to see actually. And the race aims have grown from what they initially were, which was kind of a national sporting event for raising money for the Darlington Foundation and encouraging sport in Somaliland, to a much bigger event with a competitive edge to it that is a promotion of Somali culture, what can happen in Somaliland, what's possible, and to show that to the rest of the world. So one kind of final point is that we will be going back in 3 weeks for the 3rd edition of the Somaliland Marathon, where we hope to have the first Somalilander female to be running the marathon in her home country. and are really, really excited for this. And if anyone still wants to come and join, come and see us at the end. But that's it from us. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, please come and see us.